touched on it, but the coronavirus, and even before this came out, the future of jobs and income in Maine, and how does education fit into that, right? So we've been hearing from some clients that was my college degree really worth it because I came out with so much debt, and the job that I gained from that, I'm having a hard time paying it back. So is that a myth? And what are some of the pros and cons of, attending a post-secondary education?
Sure. One of the challenges is that we have the media that tells us all these like horror stories, right, about people in those particular situations. And one of the things we talk about, and what's great about our organization is that we talk about making them plan, right? And so doing the research to make an affordable decision on the front end. So if I had me when I tried to go to that private school in the beginning, I might not have made that decision because I would have looked at it a little more financially globally and said, I don't think this can work out. So we counsel on make use of something like a net price calculator, which all colleges are required to have, that helps you calculate what the cost is going to look like year over year. And planning for, okay, let's compare these two financial aid offers and see what the bottom line is, because it's not clear just by looking at that letter. So there's a myth that college isn't worth it because we're hearing all this stuff about people being saddled with debt, but you have to sort of back it up a little bit and say, where did they decide to go? Did they have anything saved? Did they apply for financial aid on time? So that's always my little soapbox in like the comment articles. So I have to be careful because I'm like, what's the whole story? Did they go someplace they could afford? The reality is education matters. So you can make $1 million more over the course of your lifetime with a bachelor's degree than with just a high school diploma. So we keep checking that statistic. It keeps being true. Your earnings potential is greater with some kind of post-secondary education. And more jobs are requiring a bachelor's degree. Many are even starting at like a master's degree required. Certainly now in this COVID world, there's going to be, I think, more flexibility, and there's going to be a need for retraining and additional education. But it really comes down to having those affordability discussions early. And certainly, like, I have student loan debt from a bachelor's and a master's, but I have both liberal arts degrees. And so people would say, an English degree, what are you going to do with that? And I say whatever I want because I can communicate effectively. But I think it just comes down to having those affordability conversations and, doing the research. So there's lots of great ways to research starting salaries for certain fields, certain jobs, and identifying a baseline of where you might be looking, and then, utilizing financial aid as much as possible and looking for scholarships and those sorts of things. So return on investment is a conversation we have a lot, and affordability and making sure that students are, and that's part of what we do. We want you to file your FAFSA on time so you get the most financial aid possible, and really help you look for scholarships and all of that. So you kind of have to think about planning ahead is really the big key, and thinking long term, not just what's this first year going to cost me, but what are 2 or 4 years going to cost.
Just to kind of follow up on Abby's question there and your statement, Maria, about the myth of college not being worth it and sort of debunking that. Is there any other, just kind of generally speaking, myths about going to college and then going through the process of paying for college? And myth may not be the best way to approach it. Is there a way? Do you have any kind of key takeaways or just kind of tidbits that you feel people should know?
Yeah, absolutely. Myth busting is like my favorite thing to do. And I think largely because, especially with social media, I have friends that share information and I'm like, what I do for a living? Please ask me before you share these things. But, there's myths about, that if you get so much in scholarships that you lose financial aid, right? And I think that's a big one. And people say, I heard if I have savings for college, that I'm not going to get as much financial aid. The offset really you have to think about is it would have to be a significant amount of money to really devastatingly impact federal financial aid eligibility. And the trade-off is that for every dollar you have saved, it's one less dollar you potentially have to borrow and repay with interest, right? Okay. So we talk about that all the time. In a situation where there's money received either via scholarships or savings or what have you, the financial aid office is always going to reduce loans first. They're always going to try to find ways to make it fit in. So I'm not sure how that myth got started. There is an impact in financial aid, but it's nominal, and income is really the bigger driver of financial aid eligibility at the federal level.
Okay.
So, assets are protected a little bit differently. So that's a big myth. I think that there are others that kind of float around, and certainly scams also. People telling you can do certain things, or agencies that charge for the FAFSA, which the first F in FAFSA stands for free. So it's a free application. So we're constantly kind of battling that. And also I think there's just a myth that debt is bad in general, right? And so we spend a lot of time saying a lot of people have student loan debt. And what you don't hear is the success stories. And that for many families, that's a reality. I couldn't have gone to college without student loans. There was no way that we would have been able to afford it. But it's not bad debt to have as long as you pay it back. The federal loans have great repayment options. There's even forgiveness things built in, flexible repayment plans. So I think we spend a lot of time, we hear like the $1 trillion student debt crisis, but we can make it a little bit more micro and talk about it's not necessarily bad debt to have as long as you're able to pay it back. I think those are kind of the big things that we hear that we have to kind of work to debunk.
Maria, and I'll we're in videos as well, so I do want to share something with you in terms of a screen. But this is something where we use this quite a bit. This is from JP Morgan. They have the Guide to the Markets. So this is free. It's on JP Morgan's website. You can go to it and download it. It's updated every quarter. So obviously, so we're recording April, right, in 2020, and we just lost a ton of jobs, right? 5.25 million jobs in the last month just got let go. And so this is something where when we hear about the need for college, so there's two charts, and for those in the audio, I'm going to try to describe this to you. So this is the
podcast challenge, right?
The podcast challenge just described financial charts. So unemployment rate by education level is the first one we're looking at. And this goes from 1992 until 2020. And everybody can see that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if you look at the college or greater, so you've completed college or maybe you have an advanced degree on top of it, you can see the low rate of employment that basically even in the peak of the financial crisis, unemployment was around 5%. If you were less than a high school degree, you can look at 92, the average unemployment rate is about 11%, where again, college or greater was around 3%. And you can see the peak in terms of the financial crisis that unemployment went all the way up to 16%. And prior to this, again, ending 2019, unemployment for less than a high school degree was right around 5.7%. So it's just something where, look, I think yes, it's in terms of jobs that we're trying to find a match to, hey, a job to your degree and making sure that those are good matches all the time. But also in terms of maybe security, right? Is, hey, maybe not only just do I have a job, but am I more likely to keep that job? And by having transferable skills, and I know, Maria, obviously you started out as an English major, right? Yeah. And now you're in financial, which is the other brain. But that's something where you're able to learn, right? Is by having you're getting trained to learn and port skills over. And that was the other chart here that shows the average annual earnings by the highest degree it earned. And so a high school graduate, again, this is 2018 data, and this is, so a high school graduate would be earning right around, again, average would be $39,000 plus or minus. If you have a bachelor's degree, your average earnings is around $71,000. And if you have a master's degree or advanced degree on top of that, your average earnings is $99,900 nationally. So just talk about the $30,000 jumps on every level that you achieve. So yes, you're getting debt, and those are probably we have different attitudes about debt, and I think Abby and I have a conversation too. There's a healthy amount of debt and there's an unhealthy amount of debt. So figuring out that balance, but this is something worth investing in. And I think that's from the listeners here and trying to figure that out. I think that's something where we were just trying to kind of explain is, hey, this is an investment just like if you had a stock, if you had a bond, but I'm investing in a family member, a loved one, And this is what I want to see them achieve. I want to see them stability in their career, and I want to see them with higher earning potentials. Not saying they have to earn the highest amount, but I want to see them have potential to do that. Right.
Yeah. And we actually have a version of this chart. It's through the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they put it out annually that basically measures the same thing. And so unemployment goes down as education goes up, and earnings go up as education goes up, right? So, and that's been a trend no matter what the economy is doing in general. And so I think, yeah, it's really looking at, and that's the thing, I think doing the research and getting the numbers, right? And my friends laugh, they're like, you work in financial aid and you have an English degree, you do numbers all day, but I'm a big like graphs nerd. So, you know, putting together and just looking at it and saying, okay, it feels really scary and expensive and getting some debt now, but think about where you're going to be in 10 years with this kind of level of education, and what is that going to look like, and what doors does that open for you? And it's not enough just to go, right? It's to complete. So that some college, no degree group is one that we're really trying to target and really trying to capture. And my specialty area at FAME is adult education. So I'm working with a lot of adults who started and maybe never finished or never went for whatever reason. And so I think it's really about that attainment, right? Getting that, earning that credential opens up the doors. So yes, we say college access, but we also, the end game, right, is the credential attainment and what that does long term in terms of earnings potential and job security.